I have been a solicitor for a long time, 41 years of it. Wills, estates, the careful distribution of what people leave behind, a trade in endings, if you want to put it plainly. I have sat across kitchen tables from widows who could not yet say the word deceased. I have itemized the contents of houses, the way a museum catalogs a collection. The Wedgwood, the silver plate toast rack, the upright piano, in the back room that nobody plays. You read enough wills, you begin to understand that what a person owns and what a person is are rarely the same inventory. I tell you this because it is how I came to be sitting in a deck chair in a field on a Saturday afternoon in August, watching a man I had spoken to perhaps 4 times in my life sit down at an upright piano on a bandstand stage and silence 200 people. My wife Margaret had wanted to go. The Aldermere Village Jazz and Folk Festival. She had been reading about it in the local paper for 3 weeks, had folded the page and left it on the kitchen table, in the way she does when she is leaving a suggestion rather than making one. I have no particular ear for music. I know what I like, and I know very little about why. But Margaret is happiest in the open air, with something playing, so we packed a bag, drove the 12 miles to Aldermere, and found 2 deck chairs in the mild afternoon sun. It was a good crowd for a village festival. 200. Perhaps a few more. The sort of crowd that has a glass of something in one hand and a program it has already lost in the other. There were stalls selling cheese and honey and candles in preserving jars. There was a man with a dog asleep under his chair. There were children running the particular diagonal that children run at events like this, aimed at nothing, exuberant, colliding with strangers and bouncing off. The compère was a man named Gordon Spall. I did not know his name then. I learned it later. But I knew the type on sight. A large man, comfortable in front of a crowd, at home with a microphone, in a way that suggests he has never once doubted that people want to hear from him. He wore a linen jacket the color of old mustard, and worked the afternoon with the easy authority of a man managing a room, rather than sharing one. Between acts, he talked. He was good at talking. He filled the silences the way a tide fills a rock pool, efficiently and without gaps. Between the second and third acts of the afternoon, a kit changeover was taking place on the right side of the stage. A drum kit being struck, cables being repositioned. This takes time, even when it doesn't look like it should, and Gordon Spall was managing the interval with a steady stream of patter, stage history, an anecdote about an act that had once played the festival in a thunderstorm. It was during this, his eyes moving over the crowd, the reflexive professional scan for material, that he noticed the man standing near the piano. The piano was a Yamaha upright, stage left. Ordinary enough, festival circuit wear on it, the sort of instrument that has been loaded into vans so many times it has forgotten what a permanent home looks like. It had been used by the first act and not yet moved, and the man standing near it, not playing it, not touching it, just standing close, the way you might stand near a fire without meaning to move toward it, was Dennis Veal. I knew Dennis slightly. Everyone in the valley knew Dennis slightly. He ran the Crown and Feathers in Aldermere, had run it for 22 years, a solid brick pub on the high street, with a board of local ales, and a cat that slept on the windowsill. His wife Carol had died 5 years ago. Since then, he had run the place alone, which is a serious enterprise for one man, and people in the valley respected him for it, the way people respect consistent, quiet competence in others, thoroughly, and without ever saying so directly. He was not a tall man, mid-60s, a little heavy across the shoulders, the way men who have spent decades lifting things tend to be. His hair had gone to gray some years back, and he wore it neatly, as he wore everything. He was not the kind of man who stood out in a crowd. He was, in fact, precisely the kind of man a crowd absorbs and forgets. Gordon Spall had found his material. "Lovely," he said into the microphone, with the rolling warmth of a man who has spotted something useful. "Lovely. We've got a volunteer. Gentleman near the piano. Yes, you. Don't be shy. Give us something to keep things moving, would you? Something to keep the piano warm. Something jolly. Something the crowd can tap their feet to while we get the kit sorted. Good man." 200 people turned to look at Dennis Veal. He didn't answer. He didn't hold up a hand or shake his head, or smile, with the performative reluctance of a man about to comply. He simply looked at the piano for a moment, one moment, just long enough, and then he sat down on the bench. I thought, This is going to be painful. Margaret had turned to look too. I could feel her mild concern, the particular tension of a kind person who does not want to watch someone embarrassed. Dennis settled the bench. Not dramatically, the small, particular adjustment of a person who knows exactly what they need. Both hands came to rest in his lap, not on the keys, in his lap, and he sat very still for a moment, in a way that had nothing of hesitation about it. Then he played a chord. A single chord, left hand, unhurried, something low and open that spread across the afternoon air and did not dissipate. It sat there. The crowd, which had been beginning to turn back to its drinks and its conversations, did not turn back. I cannot explain to you what I heard next in any language that would satisfy a musician. I have no training. I know only what I perceived, that what followed from that first chord was not background music, was not something to tap your feet to, was not warm, in the way Gordon Spall had meant the word. It was a melody, simple enough in outline, the kind of thing you feel you have heard before, a tune with that quality of half-recognition that makes you hold still without knowing why. But in his hands, in the particular weight he gave each note, the way certain phrases paused just a fraction past where you expected them to, it was not simple at all. The talking stopped, not all at once, table by table, conversation by conversation. The way a fire goes out in a wind, patchwork, one pocket of warmth and then another, and then nothing. The woman 2 rows in front of me, I can still see her, had been mid-sentence, her wine glass halfway to her mouth. She stopped. The glass went down. Her hand came up to her lips. Not a dramatic gesture. The involuntary gesture of a person who has just heard something and needs to be very quiet to hold on to it. The man with the dog. He had been asleep too, the dog. But it lifted its head and put it down again, and its owner looked at the stage the way people look when they can't identify what they're feeling. Gordon Spall had stopped talking. His clipboard was at his side. He was standing at the edge of the stage in his old mustard jacket, and his face had changed. What had been on it before, the easy management of an afternoon, the comfortable professional authority, was simply not there anymore. He was watching Dennis Veal the way you watch something you cannot categorize. Dennis played as though no one was there. That is the only way I can put it. He was not performing. He was not managing the crowd the way Spall managed it, with an eye always on the room's temperature. His attention was on something else entirely. His head was slightly lowered, not watching his hands, the way certain people read, who are not seeing the words on the page so much as hearing a voice. He was somewhere else, present, in the way that is the opposite of display. The melody moved through a middle passage that opened unexpectedly, a stretch where the right hand found something higher and more searching, and the left hand deepened beneath it, and several people, not one, several, made the small involuntary sound that is not a word. The festival was entirely silent. I noticed, in that silence, how much noise a summer afternoon usually contains. The rattle of a program, a child asking a question somewhere, ice against glass, all of it gone. The field had gone entirely still, as though the 200 people in it had agreed, without consultation, to hold their breath. Margaret's hand found my forearm. She did not squeeze it. She simply put her hand there, the way you reach for something solid in the dark, and left it. He played for perhaps 6 minutes. The kit changeover had long been completed. Nobody moved to signal him. Nobody moved at all. He played to the resolution of the piece, a passage where the melody returned to something close to where it had begun but not quite there. The way certain things return changed, and then the final chord, a long one, held, not hurried to its close, and then nothing. The silence after was longer than it should have been. It was Dennis who broke it, in a way. He took his hands from the keys and put them back in his lap, the same posture as before, and sat for a moment. Then he stood up. He didn't take a bow. He simply stood, the way a man stands at the end of something that is finished. The applause, when it came, was not the crowd's ordinary applause. I have been to concerts. I know the sound of people clapping, because an act has ended, and this is what you do when an act ends. This was different. It started unevenly, as though people needed a moment to remember that this was permitted. And then it built. And then they were on their feet, not all at once but in a rising tide. The woman with the wine glass first, then the rows around her, then the whole field. and for a moment I could not hear anything except the sound of 200 people registering something they did not have a word for. Gordon Spall crossed the stage. He did not pick up the microphone. He walked directly to Dennis Veal and took the man's hand in both of his own. He held it. He said nothing. They stood like that, the compère and the pub landlord, for 3 or 4 seconds, and then Spall nodded, once, and stepped back. It was the most honest thing I saw him do all afternoon. I spoke to Dennis briefly at the end of the day, near the gate. I said something inadequate, as one does. He thanked me and looked past me slightly, as men do when they have already returned to a private place. What I know about his father, I learned later, from a mutual acquaintance. A situation which arises when you have practiced law in a small valley for 4 decades, more often than you might expect. The elder Veal had run the Crown and Feathers before his son, a self-taught pianist. He had played the pubs upright every Sunday afternoon, had done so for 30 years, and what Dennis had played on that stage was, as near as anyone could say, his father's favorite piece. Something the old man had never recorded, never performed anywhere except behind the bar of his own pub, and which Dennis had learned in the cellar, over 12 years, by listening to a recording he'd made on his telephone the last summer his father was alive. He had never played it for anyone. I have thought about that since. I think about it when I am going through an estate, the piano in the back room that nobody plays, the journal that was never shown, the thing kept so carefully, for so long, that it begins to belong to the keeping more than to the sharing. An estate, in law, consists of what a person owns. I have known that since I was 23. I am 69 now, and I think I have been wrong about it all my life. What Dennis Veal inherited from his father was not the piano, it was not the pub. It was 6 minutes of music that a man with no training had shaped out of silence and Sunday afternoons and nothing else, and which his son had carried, privately, for 12 years, until a compère, in an old mustard jacket, handed him, without knowing it, the only invitation he needed. You cannot put that on an inventory. I have tried, since, to understand what it means to carry something like that. Not a grief exactly, though it is adjacent to grief. A custody, perhaps. The kind of thing a person holds in trust on behalf of someone who can no longer hold it themselves, and which, held long enough in private, begins to feel like it belongs only to the darkness of the cellar, only to the 4 walls and the bare bulb and the silent keys. Until it doesn't. I have tried, since, to imagine what it would cost, that kind of keeping, what it would weigh, over 12 years, what it would sound like, finally set down. I sat in that field and I heard what it sounds like. I have not forgotten it. I do not think I will.